Michael Jordan didn't just beat players, he erased futures. Careers didn't end because they were untalented. They ended because they ran into Jordan at the wrong time. There were players who came into the league confident, believing this was their era. Then they faced Michael Jordan once, and something changed. Not on the scoreboard, not in the stat sheet, but inside their head. From that night forward, they played tighter, shot quicker, hesitated when they never used to. Some never made another All-Star team again. Some quietly disappeared from playoff rotations. Some admitted years later, "I was never the same after playing him." This isn't a highlight video. This isn't about rings or points. This is about the hidden damage Michael Jordan caused, the confidence he took, the belief he shattered, the careers that never recovered. Because once Jordan decided you were in his way, he didn't just want to win. He wanted you to remember it. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why playing Michael Jordan wasn't just a loss, it was a warning. Before we go deeper, understand this. This channel isn't for casual fans. We're building a place for people who want the stories the box score never shows and the psychology ESPN never talks about. If you want deep dives into dominance, pressure, and the mindset that breaks leagues, subscribe and join us. Now let's talk about the careers that never recovered after Michael Jordan showed up. Destroyed careers. There's a version of Michael Jordan people like to remember. The highlights, the smile, the championships, the commercials. But that version hides something far more uncomfortable. Because Prime Jordan didn't just win games, he ended trajectories. Before Michael Jordan, the NBA was a league of rising stars. Careers followed arcs. Players improved, peaked, declined, and moved on. Losses were setbacks. Bad nights were learning experiences. Jordan broke that cycle. When he entered his prime, something shifted in the league's ecosystem. Players didn't just lose, they lost belief. Teams didn't just fall short, they stalled permanently. And the scariest part? Most of the damage never shows up in box scores. You won't see it in stat lines. You won't see it in highlight reels. But you'll hear it in interviews years later when former stars pause before answering questions about playing him. Because facing Prime Jordan didn't just test your skill, it tested your identity. Take a moment to understand the environment he walked into. The late 80s and early 90s NBA was stacked with talent. Hall of Famers everywhere, elite scorers, elite defenders, hardened veterans who had survived eras before him. These weren't weak opponents. These were players who had already beaten everyone else. And then Jordan arrived. At first, it didn't feel catastrophic. It felt irritating. He scored too easily. He defended too aggressively. He played every possession like it was personal, even when it wasn't. But irritation turned into confusion, because no matter what adjustments teams made, nothing changed. Double teams didn't slow him down. Physical defense didn't wear him out. Trash talk didn't rattle him. Instead, Jordan responded by leaning in. The harder you played him, the more focused he became. And that's where the damage started. For many stars, their confidence was built on rhythm, on comfort, on knowing that if they played their game, results would follow. Jordan disrupted that rhythm completely. Against him, players didn't just have bad nights. They had nights where nothing made sense. Shots they had hit their entire careers suddenly didn't fall. Moves that worked against everyone else were erased. Defensive schemes collapsed under his pace. And after enough of those nights, something internal broke. You start pressing. You start forcing shots. You start thinking instead of reacting. That's when careers derail. Because basketball at the elite level is fragile. Confidence is currency. Once it's shaken, recovery isn't guaranteed. There were players who came into matchups with Jordan averaging 25 a game and left averaging 18 the rest of the season. Not because their talent disappeared, but because their certainty did. They stopped playing free. They started anticipating contact that wasn't there yet. They rushed decisions. They hesitated. Jordan didn't need to block every shot. He just needed you to feel him. And that feeling lingered. Some players changed their games trying to adjust to him. They added shots they didn't need. They abandoned strengths that once defined them. Others became overly cautious, passing up looks they should have taken, afraid of the counterattack that always followed a miss. Because Jordan didn't just punish mistakes, he remembered them. Miss a defensive rotation once? He'd attack that angle all night. Show frustration? He'd press harder. Lose focus for half a second? He'd end the game in that moment. And here's the part. most people don't talk about. Jordan didn't just do this to opponents, he did it repeatedly, night after night, season after season. So players didn't just fear losing to him, they feared becoming irrelevant because of him. Think about what that does to a competitor's psyche. You spend your entire life climbing. You refine your game. You sacrifice years for a window of greatness. And then one man stands in that window and closes it. Not with arrogance, not with celebration, but with quiet inevitability. There were stars who never reached their prime simply because Jordan existed at the same time. Not because they weren't good enough to win in another era, but because they couldn't survive his era. Teams built around them stalled, front offices panicked, coaches were fired, and the narrative always sounded the same. We just ran into Jordan, as if that explained everything. But running into Jordan wasn't bad luck. It was exposure. Exposure to a level of psychological pressure most players were never prepared for. Because Jordan didn't just show up to play, he showed up to dominate the mental environment. By the time he reached his true prime, opponents walked into games already compromised. They studied film not to find solutions, but to minimize damage. That's not competition, that's survival. And once you're playing to survive, your ceiling collapses. This is how careers don't just end, they fade, not with injuries, not with scandals, but with unanswered questions. Why did I never get over the hump? Why did my best season stop early? Why did I feel smaller against him? The answers weren't physical, they were psychological. And Jordan knew it. Because Prime Jordan wasn't trying to beat you once. He was trying to make sure you never believed you could beat him again. And that belief, once lost, almost never comes back. And this was only the beginning. Because as the league tried to adapt, as stars tried to reinvent themselves, Jordan took the next step. He stopped just breaking confidence. He started controlling fear. And that's where things truly changed. Some moments in sports don't belong on a highlight reel. They belong somewhere quieter, somewhere permanent. Because what Michael Jordan did in his prime wasn't just entertainment, it was a mindset. The pressure, the silence before the run, the look that told you the game was already over. That's why we started turning moments from the Prime series into limited edition canvas art. Not merch, not decoration, but reminders. Reminders of what obsession looks like, what discipline feels like, what dominance costs. If you're watching on TV, you'll see a QR code on screen. If you're on mobile or desktop, the link is in the description and pinned comment. No rush, no hype. Just something built for people who understand what this era meant. Because some moments don't belong on a screen, they belong on a wall. When the league finally broke. By the time Michael Jordan reached this phase of his prime, the NBA wasn't adjusting anymore. It was reacting. Defensive schemes didn't evolve. They panicked. Coaches didn't outthink him. They prayed for whistles. Opponents didn't plan to stop him. They planned to survive him. Because something had shifted. Jordan was no longer proving he was the best player in the league. That argument was already over. What he was proving now was something far more unsettling. There was no version of basketball where he didn't win. The illusion of control was gone early in Jordan's career. Teams believed in containment. Double him. Force him left. Make him pass. Wear him down. That belief kept coaches sane, because as long as there was a plan, there was hope. But Prime Jordan shattered that illusion completely. He scored when doubled. He dominated when triple-teamed. He passed just enough to punish rotations, then punished defenders for hesitating again. The game stopped feeling strategic. It started feeling inevitable. Teams would execute defensive possessions perfectly and still watch the ball fall through the net. That's when confidence erodes, not when you're beaten badly, but when you're beaten correctly. Jordan didn't rush. He waited. What separated Prime Jordan from every other scorer wasn't speed or athleticism. It was timing. He didn't attack immediately. He read. He waited. He watched defenders commit emotionally, then punished them physically. A half-step lean, a hand dropping, a defender trying not to foul. Jordan stored those reactions, and when the moment arrived, he didn't explode. He executed. That's why defenders felt helpless. They weren't losing to chaos. They were losing to control. The league felt it in silence. Watch old footage closely. The loudest arenas went quiet at the same moments. When Jordan isolated, when he backed his man down, when he caught the ball on the wing with space. Crowds didn't cheer. They held their breath. Opposing fans knew what was coming and couldn't stop watching it happen. That silence is important, because silence means acceptance. Superstars became supporting characters. Prime. Jordan didn't just beat teams, he reduced stars. Hall of Fame players found themselves watching from the weak side. Scoring leaders disappeared in fourth quarters. Defensive anchors were pulled into foul trouble or fear. The conversation shifted. Not, can we beat the Bulls, but can we keep it respectable? That's when dominance crosses into psychological damage. The fourth quarter became a verdict. Jordan's prime didn't peak in the first 3 quarters. It crystallized in the fourth. When legs were tired, when rotation slowed, when defenders hesitated between helping and surviving. That's when Jordan stopped sharing the moment. He took it. Isolation possessions weren't desperate. They were ceremonial. Everyone knew who was taking the shot. Everyone knew where it was coming from, and no one could stop it. That certainty broke teams faster than any highlight dunk ever could. Defenders started playing not to be embarrassed. There's a moment in every matchup, subtle, almost invisible, when a defender realizes, I can't win this. After that, the goal changes. Hands go up later, challenges soften, body language retreats. Jordan sensed that instantly, and once he had it, he never let it go. The Bulls didn't need chaos, they had certainty. Chicago wasn't reckless, they were surgical, because when the game slowed down, they had something no other team possessed, a closer who couldn't be rushed. Jordan didn't force shots, he selected them. And when he missed, he didn't react emotionally. He waited again. That patience unnerved defenders more than aggression ever could. This is when the league broke. Not in a single game, not in a single finals, but over seasons, when the same endings repeated, when the same shots fell, when the same silence followed. The league didn't just accept Jordan's greatness, it accepted its limits. And that's when the era truly belonged to him. Because Prime Jordan wasn't about moments. It was about patterns. Patterns of control, patterns of dominance, patterns of inevitability. And once the NBA recognized the pattern, there was nothing left to figure out. Before we end this, if you've been watching the Prime series, you already understand something most fans don't. This isn't about highlights. It's about mindset, pressure, obsession, and what greatness actually costs. We're building a community around that idea, the psychology behind elite performers, not the surface-level stories you hear everywhere else. If that's how you see the game, subscribe. Not for uploads, for perspective. And one last thing, some moments don't belong on a screen, they belong on a wall. We've turned the Prime series into limited edition MJ-inspired canvas art, designed to capture this era, this mentality, this dominance. No logos, no noise, just the mindset that defined greatness. If you're watching on TV, scan the QR code on screen. If you're on mobile or desktop, the link is in the description and pinned comment. This isn't merch, it's a reminder. Thanks for being part of Prime.